Okay, now to the book of Nahum. I have no idea about anything about Nahum except that where he comes from. It says here in chapter 1, verse 1, an oracle concerning Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. So that he comes from a place called like Elkosh or something like that, but I don't know where that is. I don't know if anyone knows where that is. I don't know who Nahum was. Nahum is not a name we hear about anywhere else in the Old Testament. So I can't tell you anything about Nahum. I don't know anything about his background, except where he's from. I don't know anything about his ministry, except that he had this one oracle against Nineveh. And he's delivering it, of course, to Judah and Jerusalem. It concerns Nineveh, but unlike Jonah, we don't necessarily know that Nahum went to Nineveh. He may have. But he's giving an oracle about Nineveh, apparently, to the people of Judah and Jerusalem. And this would be sometime, probably before Zephaniah. Nahum's, okay, so there's two important dates to keep in mind here. Assyria fell, Nineveh fell in the year 612 BC. That's when Babylon finally sacked the place and destroyed it, burned the palace with the royal family inside, and that was the end of Nineveh. So it has to be before then, of course. In decades before that, in about 664 BC or so, Nineveh finally conquered Egypt. They went down to Egypt, went all the way down to southern Egypt, and conquered the city that we now call Thebes, which at the time was called No Amun or No Amon or whatever, something about their god Amon or whatever. And that was a major event because it basically meant that Assyria had conquered Egypt, which had been a dream of Mesopotamian emperors forever. And Assyria finally accomplishes this. Isaiah, at the beginning of his book, even talks about the Assyrian kings as boasting about wanting to conquer Egypt, or having already conquered Egypt even though they hadn't conquered it yet. Like it had always been the dream of Assyria and other kings in that region of the world to conquer Egypt. Egypt had been the dominant power for millennia at this point, and they were fading. By this point in time, they were fading. Actually, they were close to the end of their existence as an independent nation. And the powers to the east of Israel were getting stronger: Assyria, Babylon, Persia. And these nations always took it like as a personal challenge, as a major thing to do, to subjugate Egypt. And Assyria did so in 664 BC under the reign of Ashurbanipal, their powerful king from the mid-600s, and conquered Egypt and sacked Thebes, the city we call Thebes. That's actually its Greek name. Now, they didn't keep it. Assyria did not maintain a presence down there for very long. In fact, I think the Egyptians kind of reclaimed it a couple of years later. So it's not like it was a permanent, lasting victory, but just the act of a hostile nation going all the way down to that far into Egypt and conquering it itself was a seismic event. That happened in 664 BC, and that's referenced here in Nahum as a past event. So this book would have been written sometime between 664 and 612 BC. Don't know when exactly, but sometime in the same time period as late Manasseh or early Josiah. Manasseh, of course, submitted to Assyria. He was eventually captured by Assyria and taken to Babylon as a prisoner for some reason or another. Even before that, there's no reason to assume. There's every reason to assume that Manasseh was always a loyal vassal of Assyria. He's listed in the Syrian list as one of the kings that gave tribute to Assyria. So this would have been sometime in the later part of Manasseh's reign or early in Josiah's reign. But it's hard to say. It's hard to get any more precise than that. It could have come before or after Zephaniah. It's hard to say for sure. Anyway, an oracle concerning Nineveh. This is, by the way, just before I begin, this is the message that Jonah wanted to preach. All right. Jonah went to Nineveh in about the year 800 BC, 150 or 200 years earlier. And this is the message that he wanted to preach. This is what he wanted to tell the Ninevites. Nahum gets to deliver the message that Jonah wanted to deliver. Jonah would have loved for a chance to speak the message that Nahum gets to speak here. An oracle concerning Nineveh. The book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord takes vengeance and is filled with wrath. The Lord takes vengeance on his foes and maintains his wrath against his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. So he doesn't do this capriciously or without good reason, even against nations that are not his. He's slow to anger. He gave Nineveh 200 years. He had Jonah go to them in the early 800s BC. That was 150 plus years ago. That was 5, 6, 7 generations ago. And it's taken until now before they finally have gotten to the point where he's ready to judge them. So he's slow to anger and great in power. He will not leave the guilty unpunished. Eventually he's going to have to act. He will wait a long time. Longer than maybe we think he should sometimes. Okay, but he will not leave the guilty unpunished. There will come a point when he will act. His way is in the whirlwind of the tornado and the storm, and clouds are the dust at his feet. He rebukes the sea and dries it up. He makes all the rivers run dry. Bashan and Carmel wither. Those are very fertile areas in the land of Israel. And the blossoms of Lebanon fade. Those Lebanon trees, we're talking about those great trees of Lebanon. So the fertile areas wither, and the great trees, the blossoms of the great trees fade. The mountains quake before him, and the hills melt away. The earth trembles at his presence, the world and all who live in it. Who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his fierce anger? His wrath is poured out like fire. The rocks are shattered before him. But the Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. So for those who are ready for him, all these things he's going to do are nothing to fear. You can take refuge in him, even when he's in the midst of laying out vengeance on his enemies. The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him. But with an overwhelming flood, he will make an end of Nineveh. He will pursue his foes into darkness. Whatever they plot against the Lord, he will bring to an end. Trouble will not come the second time. As far as I can tell, Assyria never came up against Judah again after Sennacherib's invasion in 701 BC. Assyria remained the dominant power in the region for 90 years after that. But as far as I can tell, they never went against Judah again. Now, Manasseh, Hezekiah's son, willingly submitted to them and became a loyal vassal of theirs. And they did arrest him at one point. But it doesn't appear as though they ever came against the nation of Judah again after 701 BC. He will bring an end, and trouble will not come a second time. Doesn't mean they were good. Doesn't mean they weren't still causing lots of trouble to other people. But apparently they didn't harass the Judahites any further after that. They will be entangled among thorns and drunk from their wine. They will be consumed like dry stubble. From you, O Nineveh, has one come forth who plots evil against the Lord and counsels wickedness. I don't know who this is. I guess one of their kings. Maybe Ashurbanipal. He might have been the king who was alive at this time. Ashurbanipal was king in the mid-600s BC. He was the one who actually attacked Thebes, the city in Egypt we're going to be reading about here down in chapter 3. And he may have been the one who is being talked about here. Maybe some other king. I don't know. This is what the Lord says. Although they have allies and are numerous, they will be cut off and pass away. And although I have afflicted you, O Judah, I will afflict you no more. But now I will break their yoke from your neck and tear your shackles away. Now, Assyria, as far as I know, did not subjugate Judah forcefully and deport them like they had done in the northern kingdom of Israel. But Manasseh was a vassal state of Assyria and did have to pay them tribute. So that could be what the yoke is referring to there. The yoke of being a vassal state. The Lord has given a command concerning you, Nineveh. You will have no descendants to bear your name. I will destroy the carved images and cast idols that are in the temple of your gods. I will prepare your grave, for you are vile. That's about the most explicit threat you'll ever hear God give. All the stuff he talks about, all the stuff he says about judgment and punishing his enemies. I can't think of anything I'd less rather hear from God than him saying he's going to prepare my grave because I'm vile. And that's That's about the most, I can't imagine anything more ominous than that. I'll prepare your grave, for you are vile. Look, there in the mountains, the feet of one who brings good news. That's the news that Nineveh has fallen. Who proclaims peace, Nineveh has fallen. Celebrate your festivals, O Judah, and fulfill your vows. No more will the wicked invade you. They will be completely destroyed. Now the wicked are going to invade them. Okay, as soon as Assyria is gone, Babylon is going to come along and take their place. So Judah is not going to have a lot of peace after Nineveh falls. But the Ninevites are gone. The context here is that Nineveh has fallen. The Assyrians are going to be fallen. And even the Babylonians, as wicked as they are, were not as cruel as the Assyrians were. Nobody was ever as cruel as the Assyrians were. An attacker advances against you, Nineveh. Guard the fortress. Watch the road. Brace yourselves. Marshal all your strength. The Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob, like the splendor of Israel, though destroyers have laid them waste and have ruined their vines. The shields of his soldiers are red. The warriors are clad in scarlet. Now, I don't know if that's referring to blood being stained on these shields, or if they're just red shields. I'm not sure. The metal on the chariots flashes on the day they are made ready. The spears of pine are brandished. The chariots storm through the streets, rushing back and forth through the squares. They look like flaming torches. They dart about like lightning. He summons his picked troops, yet they stumble on their way. They dash to the city wall. The protective shield is put in place. Their river gate. Now, I don't know. I'm not entirely clear if this is describing the enemy advance into the city or their advance to defend the city. I'm not clear. I'm not really clear on that. Or maybe we're going back and forth. It seems to be kind of written deliberately to be vague about that, but something's happening. Okay, a battle is happening. There is confusion in the city because a battle is happening in the city. They dash to the city wall. The protective shield is put in place. The river gates are thrown open, and the palace collapses. This would appear to be a reference to how the Babylonians ultimately conquered the city. Now, the Babylonians are not named here or identified as the conquering force, but that, of course, they were the conquering force. And this may or may not be a reference to how they got into the city. I'm not clear on that. It is decreed that the city will be exiled and carried away. Its slave girls moan like doves and beat upon their breasts. Slave girls would have been the absolute lowest in the social totem pole, and even they are going to moan like doves and beat upon their breasts. Nineveh is like a pool whose water is draining away. It's just emptying out. The life is draining out of the body. Stop, stop, they cry, but no one turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. The supply is endless. The wealth from all those treasures, all that stuff the Assyrians took, all that tribute they gathered from other nations, all the booty they stole, the plunder they took from when they conquered other nations, here it is for the taking. Now their conquerors get to have it. She is pillaged, plundered, stripped. Hearts melt, knees give way, bodies tremble, every face grows pale. Where now is the lion's den, the place where they fed their young, where the lion and the lioness went, and the cubs with nothing to fear? The lion killed enough for his cubs, and strangled the prey for his mate, filling his lairs with the kill and his dens with the prey. Now the Assyrians liked lions. They were very boastful and prideful in their ability to hunt lions. There was lion imagery and motifs all over Nineveh. So now they saw themselves as the lions, as the mighty hunters. And now where are they? Now what's happened to them? I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will burn up your chariots in smoke, and the sword will devour your young lions. I will leave you no prey on the earth. The voices of your messengers will no longer be heard. Woe to the city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims. These people boasted in their cruelty to other people. They would take out the hearts of their enemies and stick them on poles. They would flay their enemies alive, and they would cover their walls with skins of their defeated enemies. They would They would cut off their heads and throw their heads in a pile in front of the gates of the city that they're about to attack. We've already read about how they would stick hooks and stuff in people's cheeks and noses and tongues and tug them along to take them back to their new land where they were taking them. They were a viciously cruel people, and they did it for the sake of cruelty. Okay, they did all this for the sake of it. Like, this wasn't done other than just to be done. Like, they did all this cruel stuff just for the sake of doing it. Full of plunder, never without victims. The crack of whips, the clatter of wheels, galloping horses, jolting chariots, charging cavalry, flashing swords, glittering spears, many casualties, piles of dead, bodies without number, people stumbling over the corpses. All because of the wanton lust of a harlot, alluring the mistress of sorceries, who enslaved nations by her prostitution and peoples by her witchcraft. I'm not entirely clear whether this imagery here is a reference to their siege and attack by the Babylonians, or their own, the way they treated other nations when they conquered them, or maybe kind of a mixture of both. But it was because of the spirit of seduction that they succumbed to. Remember how in Proverbs we read about these two women, Lady Folly and Lady Justice, and we're supposed to go in the past that they wanted you to go down. You're supposed to go down the road that leads to wisdom instead of the road that leads to folly. That's what this is bringing for. These people chose the road that leads to folly. They drank from the seductress's cup of wine. They followed the temptress into temptation. We'll see this again in Revelation, when there's another harlot pictured as sitting there boasting of her greatness over the world. And that is compared again to the holy bride, the people of God who rejected that temptation, who said no to that temptation. These are the people who said yes. The people who succumbed to the temptation. The people who went down the road that leads to folly. I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will lift your skirts over your face. I will show the nations your nakedness, and the kingdoms your shame. I will pelt you with filth. I will treat you with contempt. I will make you a spectacle. All who see you will flee from you and say, Nineveh is in ruins. Who will mourn for her? Where can I find anyone to comfort you? Nineveh was so hated that no one's going to mourn for her. No one's going to comfort her. At the end of Revelation, when Babylon, the city personified as wickedness, falls, the nations of the earth do mourn over her. No one's mourning over Nineveh now. Nineveh is so awful and so cruel, no one's going to feel bad for Nineveh. Are you better than Thebes? That's that city in Egypt we were talking about earlier. Situated on the Nile with water around her, the river was her defense, the waters her wall. Cush and Egypt were her boundless strength. Put and Libya were among her allies. Yet she was taken captive and sent into exile. By Assyria, by the way. So he's using Assyria's own accomplishment at capturing Thebes and conquering Egypt and saying, what happened to them can happen to you. For years and years and years and years and years, it seemed impossible that any of these Mesopotamian states would ever conquer Egypt until you finally did it. But are you any better than they are? Yet she was taken captive and went into exile. Her infants were dashed to pieces at the head of every street. By you, by the way, by Assyria. Lots were cast for her nobles, and all her great men were put in chains. You too will become drunk. You will go into hiding and seek refuge from the enemy. All your fortresses are like fig trees, with their first ripe fruit. When they are shaken, the figs will fall into the mouth of the eater. So you're about ready to fall. You may not realize it, but you're ripe. You're ripe for a harvest. You're ripe for a plunder. Look at all your troops. They are all women. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. Fire has consumed their bars. Draw water for the siege. Strengthen your defenses. Work the city. Tread the mortar. Prepare the brickwork. There the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you down, and, like grasshoppers, consume you. multiply like grasshoppers, multiply like locusts. You have increased the number of your merchants until they are more than the stars of the sky. But, like locusts, they strip the land and then fly away. Your guards are like locusts, your officials like swarms of locusts that settle in the walls on a cold day. But when the sun appears, they fly away, and no one knows where. You know, Assyria, Nineveh, the city in particular being talked to here specifically, was literally lost for centuries. After the invasion by Babylon and the destruction, it was abandoned, fell into ruins, and then over the time it got covered up by sand, and for 2,000 years no one ever even knew where it was. I think it was finally discovered sometime in the 1800s by some archaeological expedition, which uncovered the city of Nineveh, but it had been covered up by sand for over 2,000 years, and no one even knew where it was. That's how thoroughly destroyed it was. No one knows where. O king of Assyria, your shepherds slumber, your nobles lie down to rest. Your people are scattered on the mountains with no one to gather them. Nothing can heal your wound. Your injury is fatal. Everyone who hears the news about you claps his hands at your fall. For who has not felt your endless cruelty? These books of the minor prophets are so short. The last words in the book of Jonah, 200 or so years earlier, were, "Should I not be concerned about that great city?" That's what God's attitude was toward the city in Jonah's day. But now, 150, 200 years later, his final words are, "Who? Everyone who hears the news about you claps his hands at your fall. For who has not felt your endless cruelty?" So there does come a point when God says, "That's it, I've had it." He gave them the chance to repent. And they did, apparently, in the days of Jonah. That generation of Ninevites apparently did repent. That didn't last very long, though. It didn't take very long for the Assyrians and the Ninevites to resume their wicked ways and get even worse, actually, as time went on. And so now God is saying, "That's it. I've had it. I'm done with Nineveh. I am going to use the Babylonians." He hasn't identified the Babylonians here, but we know in history that this is who it is of being. "I'm going to use the Babylonians to totally wipe you out, totally destroy you to the point where no one's even going to know where you are. You're going to be so thoroughly scrubbed out of history that your entire city is going to be covered with sand for 2,000 years, and no one's even going to know where it is." God has a limit to his patience. There comes a point when he says, "That's enough. No more. This far you may go, and no farther." Now, each of us experiences that in our own lives. Manasseh got 55 years. His son Amon got 2. Okay? Nineveh got 200 years even after Jonah was there. I don't know why God gives something. I don't know how God determines that, okay? I am not in charge of those decisions. He gives some people 55 years. He gives some people 2 years. He gives some nations 1,000 years. He gives some nations 100 years. I don't know. I don't know how he makes that determination. But I know that he does. And I know that whether it's 55 years or 2 years or whatever it may be, individually, collectively, and nationally, he does have a line where he says, "This is it. There is no more. Once you pass this line, there is no going back from that." The Israelites have already passed the line in Nahum's day. For Josiah's sake, he's going to delay their judgment until after he's dead. But there is no returning from that. It's going to happen. Like they have already crossed that line, and judgment is inevitable, even though it's going to be delayed a few more decades until Josiah's generation is cleaned out, and then there's a whole other group of people there. It's going to happen, and sooner or later it does happen. He does not put up with wickedness. He'll allow us to go again. He never promised that he gave us the option not to do his will. But he never promised that there would be no consequences for not doing his will. When we talk about freedom of choice or freedom in general, we're not talking about freedom from consequences of making the wrong choice. That was never promised, and that was never given. He gave the Ninevites 200 years to repent. Apparently they did briefly for a while, and then after that they went back to their wicked ways and stuck in them ever since, and then they eventually got thoroughly destroyed and wiped out to the degree where their city was even buried by sand for 2,000 years. And no one felt sorry for them. Everyone who heard it clapped his hands and rejoiced because they were so hated. So that's Zephaniah and Nahum. The next prophetic book is going to be Habakkuk. And we'll read Obadiah. Obadiah is extremely short, and we'll read that. We'll throw that in there too. And then we have Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, two really long ones. I think I will go ahead and finish the historical books of Kings and Chronicles, because I've only got a couple more chapters in both of those. And then we'll turn our attention to Habakkuk and Obadiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and just kind of read those after getting done with the historical books, because there really isn't any reason we've only got like a couple chapters left in both of those books, and there's just no good reason to read like everything but like the last paragraph or something. So I'll go ahead and finish the historical books and get all that done, and then we'll go in and go through these prophetic books one by one by one by one. And that'll take us into their captivity. Jeremiah and Ezekiel both lived into the captivity. Ezekiel, in fact, was one of the captives. Now, Jeremiah himself was not taken captive, but Ezekiel was. And they both lived during that time. And, of course, Daniel lived primarily most of his life in captivity. So we'll read that, too. And that's that for Zephaniah and Nahum. So 2 more books are done. 2 more. We get to chalk up 2 more and throw them on the finished pile.